Hey, so if you watched my video on problematic faves, I did say I was gonna go through my general thoughts on the show, and there's a lot. I have a whole Google Doc that I was taking notes in while I was watching. And yeah, I guess overall impressions is that it's not bad. If you've watched the Shyamalan version recently, it's a lot better than that, but it's still not good. It is very one-dimensional. There are parts where it looks really good, and there are parts where it looks really bad. There's a lot of really bad green screen. There's a lot of really bad acting. I guess I'll go through my notes. They're done episode by episode. Big thing that I think is worth talking about is showing the genocide of the airbenders, of the air nomads. This is one where it's a recurring issue I have with the show, where I feel like it's not entirely sure who the target market is. On one hand, it feels like they're targeting people that grew up with Avatar, around my age, 25 to 30. And they've kind of adulted it up, right? It's a bit more mature, it's a bit more serious. But at the same time, it also, the way that it's written is very, very baby. There's not a lot of depth. There's basically zero subtext throughout the entire thing. So to me, that reads as they're targeting a younger audience, like the original, like 8 to 10-year-olds. And showing the genocide, which they show as not very violent, but definitely more violent than I was expecting. Like, we see a guy get a hole blasted through his chest. I wasn't expecting that. And yeah, I think whether that's a good or a bad thing, hell, I miss, is another thing entirely. But it was one of those things that just feels a bit disconnected. A lot of people were also really mad about Aang flying without a glider in the first couple minutes. It's not really flying, kind of like gliding down, which, from what I remember, is something that he does and seems reasonable. And the flying that like a lot of people are referring to is Zalfir, is that the name? It's been a while, I don't remember. And the whole thing of like, yeah, he has to let go of all his earthly possessions. And then, yeah, this dude's like fucking Superman flying. It's a different thing. Most of my comments are bad acting and set extensions. So all the CG backgrounds and stuff, I compared them to the prequels, because particularly not Clone Wars, Attack of the Clones, it looks a lot like that, where a lot of the backgrounds feel like very cheap CG. And some of the stuff is really good. Like, later in the Kyoshi Island episode, all the environments in that, I'd say, are really fucking good, because it looks like they shot on location. I can't say that for sure, but in the first episode, there is a lot of set extensions. You know, whether they're just shot on a regular green screen or they're shooting on the like new the camera that's got the location tracker thing, and then all the displays around the set. So it's like real-time green screen, I guess. I think it's called the volume. I don't know, the thing that they use in The Mandalorian, which I think is a really cool piece of tech. I just think it's starting to get used way too much. And there's a lot of shots where it's very obvious, and I don't love that. And that's not just an episode. Like, episode 1's really bad about it, but further on, it happens less, I would say, but still a good bit. Aang's monologue to Appa is bad. Gordon Cormier, I think he's like 12 or 13, right? Like, he's quite young. And a lot of people have praised his acting, which I don't understand. I think his acting is okay. Not very good, but okay. It feels very one note a lot of the time. And when he tries to deviate from that one note, that's where it starts to feel bad. Like, it doesn't quite have the depth to it yet. Sokka and Katara are also quite bad. I would say all the supporting cast, for the most part, is pretty good. And all our leads kind of suck. I was really disappointed. This is in my notes, but this is something I noticed more into the series, is that Appa and Momo are not really characters here. Appa is a plot device to get people from location to location, and they're not really part of the group, part of the gang. And I don't like that. I get that they're going for like a little more serious, a little more realism, but I think that takes a lot of the charm out of it. And I think that's one of the things that like the live action One Piece did really well, is it didn't take itself super seriously. It was still quite lighthearted, like One Piece is. And this feels like a downgrade from the original Avatar because the tone is so different. It's serious all the time, or almost all of the time, which means that when you have a serious moment, it's less impactful. One of the great things about the original Avatar is that there is so much levity and lightheartedness that when a serious moment comes in, that tonal shift is much more noticeable. And so those serious moments become much more impactful because of the contrast to usually being quite lighthearted. And it lacks that here. I found Sokka was annoying with no charm, which I didn't feel like that was the case in the original series. And that goes on to my multitude of problems with Sokka, which if you haven't watched the video on the main channel, that's mostly where I talk about it. But yeah, not only does he lack his negative traits, he lacks a lot of his positive ones as well. He's a bit lifeless. I would say the same with Katara. Katara doesn't have that feisty anger that makes her really interesting. Particularly, I think it's in book 3 where like Katara's got this conflict of like, why am I being the mom of the group all the time? But is also like one of the most hot-headed and strongest individuals in the group. And that episode's really interesting, where you have that whole dynamic of that conversation that Sokka has with Toph, where it's like, yeah, if I close my eyes and think of my mother, I can only see Katara's face. And that's, again, another great example of the show has a lot of levity, and then when it comes to serious emotional moments like that, the contrast is what makes that so impactful. Versus if you threw out that line here, I wouldn't feel it stick with me as much, because there's not the contrast of going from something very lighthearted to very serious. Katara's grandmother and Katara doing lore dumps is bad. Just general issue I have with the scripts is that it feels like a first draft. They've gone through, they've put all the narrative beats in there, they've put all the information that they want characters to say in the places where they'll put the actual dialogue. Just being like, cool, so they need to convey this bit of information in this bit of dialogue. And then they shot with the first draft. And so they're just saying the quiet part out loud. This is what I mean by saying it has zero subtext, because there isn't any nuance to the way the characters speak. It is so one-dimensional, and it's very much, this is exactly what I'm thinking is exactly what I'm saying. And that's boring. As much as I like Iroh in this series, I don't think his characterization is quite the same as the original Iroh. Kind of the same issue that I have with Sokka is all the levity has been taken out of his character, and he's still got that sage wisdom and playing the parental figure of Zuko. And I really like that dynamic of their relationship. It's one of the things that this series does quite well. But yeah, I think, again, the lack of levity makes the serious moments less impactful. And it just feels like Iroh has a lot of serious moments all the time. Aside from like the little side tangents where it's like, oh, I was looking for some food. We're here in this Earth Nation city to appreciate the environment. And when he gets caught up about the two guys playing Pow Show or whatever the board game is, and he's like really excited about that, and Zuko's not taking it seriously, and he says that something along the lines of, because they're completely untrained, they're using strategies that I've never seen before. And I thought that was like a nice little anecdote to teach Zuko. That was a good moment. Oh, I hate the score. The score is so exceptionally generic. Like, you could throw that on Game of Thrones or not quite The Witcher. It's too light for The Witcher. But you could throw it on like any realistic fantasy show that's been broadcast in the past 7 years, and it would feel appropriate. And that's not good. That's boring. That's something that like other people have done whole videos on, of the issue with like temp scoring, where the editor will put in a like reference score, or like, you know, a track that they like or the director likes while they're editing, and then because the scene is kind of edited to the flow of that track, then when it's sent off to your composer, the composer a lot of the time just ends up kind of following what the temp track was like. And so then we have a bunch of homogeneity in film because people are using temp tracks, and the temp tracks get used as reference, and the circle continues because then everything kind of sounds the same. And my other issue with this being in the typical modern fantasy thing, everyone feels too clean. This is a big thing with the Lord of the Rings series, Rings of Power, that came out last year, 2 years ago. And that sucked because everything was so fucking clean. One of the great things about Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings trilogy, as much as I don't really care for it, is, God, there's such grit to it. It feels like you're in there. It feels like they have been traveling for weeks, that they have been fucking sleeping in the middle of a forest with basically nothing. That bit of grit and detail to it, that bit of weathering, makes it feel much more immersive to me. It makes it easier to suspend my disbelief versus, yeah, everything in this and the Rings of Power. I'm trying to think of other fantasy shows, but I don't watch that much fantasy anymore. But everything looking super fucking clean, I hate. Give me grit, give me realism. If you're gonna go with realism, make it realistic. Episode 2, Zuko's tantrum right at the start. Really good. Like I said, I think one of the things the show does well is Zuko and Iroh. Sozin? No, Sozin's the grandfather. What's Zuko's dad's name? Fuck, I forgot. Anyway, Zuko's dad, I have mixed feelings about. Played by Daniel Day Kim, I think it is. I think his performance is quite good, but I think the characterization isn't quite there. It's gone from abusive, because like it's pretty clear that in the original series, Zuko's father is abusive, and now he's just mean. A lot of people will read those as the same thing, but they're not. There is a very big difference between cruel and abusive. Abuse is like a really big part of not just Zuko's arc, but Azula's as well. And God, I fucking hate Azula in this, but I don't really have that much to say because she doesn't get that much screen time, and most of it sucks. Kyoshi Island. Aang has a big monologue talking to the matriarch of the little community, and again, it feels like an adult speaking through a child's mouth. I don't like that. I get that the Avatar is meant to be, you know, big world-saving entity, a bit bigger than they might seem in person, but no, this is very much, and that's one thing that I think the show lacks a lot of as well, is Aang being a kid. There's parts of it, but it's not quite to the same extent of the original show. He's a little too mature, he's a little too balanced, and I get part of it is like they've done it to streamline it, right? I don't think they've done a good job of streamlining it. Like with the live action One Piece has so much fucking filler and so much bloat that the live action One Piece actually does a reasonably good job of streamlining the viewing experience into something that most audiences would actually watch. Avatar does not. They have not done that. The runtime is 30 minutes shorter than the original first season, and there is significantly less in it. It's just not. It's a bad compression of that first season. Sokka and Suki also throwing eyes at each other, which I mentioned in the video. I hate that. It just feels completely unearned. Really fucking annoying. But it is what it is. The whole Sokka-Suki dynamic is forced. That's most of my notes in this one. Maria Zhang, really fucking good, especially when she's playing off Sokka. Her comedic timing is really good as well. Just that, like, the little, like, nod, completely serious, when Sokka's like, oh, can I, like, show you the basics? When he's awkwardly throwing the throwing axe boomerang thing. It doesn't really seem to act like a boomerang in this one. In the original series, definitely used that way a lot more. Definitely not used like that here. Oh yeah, I don't know why they had Suki wipe her Kyoshi makeup off in that scene. I found that really interesting because when she did it, obviously because I've watched the original, I know, okay, there's the big fight coming up. I thought it was going to be, so it would be easier for the audience to separate her from the other Kyoshi warriors, so it's easier to follow her in a fight. But the other Kyoshi warriors are so sidelined in the fight that wasn't necessary. So maybe that was the thought, and then they shot it differently. But yeah, it just seemed like an interesting choice. I thought Commander Zhao was quite good. I think his performance was actually quite enjoyable, and I liked that dynamic. Honestly, I'll say the Fire Nation half of the series better than Aang and the Gang half of the series. I would say there's more better acting there. There's still a lot of bad acting there, but there's more good acting. And it seems to have butchered those characters less. So thumbs up to that. Like I said, Zuko and Iroh in particular, as much as I feel like Iroh's been toned down a lot, which I'm disappointed about, I think their dynamic works really fucking well. Oh yeah, fucking Suki saying thank you for bringing the world to me to Sokka when he actively didn't want to. On one hand, it feels like the plot rewarding him for fighting that urge to go home, which is established at the start of this episode. But on the other hand, it feels unearned. Much like that entire romantic dynamic between the two feels very unearned. I'm going to turn on a light. That's not a whole lot better. On to episode 3 notes. Azula fucking sucks. I hate her performance in this. Ozai is alright, there we go. Remember the name eventually. Aang is still not great. Like I said, very one-dimensional, a lot of one note. When he tries to deviate from that one note, it just feels undercooked. Undercooked is a really good way to describe the show. I think it actually could have been alright if it had more time, but also, it's been in development for 5 years. What the fuck happened in 5 years they butchered it this badly? Yeah, note halfway through this episode, I think the show is perfectly adequate for anyone that hasn't watched the original. And I think that sums it up really well. If Netflix's goal was to try and reach a new audience, this show does a fine job of that. For people that are like, oh, I'm not gonna watch it, like my parents, they hear animation, like, no, I'm not gonna fucking watch it. I'm like, well, you are missing out on some of the greatest parts of cinema, but sure. And look, I wouldn't get them to watch the original Avatar because that is very much targeted for kids. But I'm talking about stuff like Redline or Spider-Verse or Puss in Boots, right? They're like really fucking good and, you know, family versus kids content. But yeah, that kind of feels where the show was going. It was trying to reach people that had never watched the original, had no intention of ever watching the original. If that was their target market, I think they did a fine job then. I don't like it. I don't think it's good. But for that market, okay, sure, whatever. Omashu, the Earth City, it's really fucking well presented. I love the design that they've done there. Visually, it's always interesting to look at every angle, except for when they're on the city streets. And again, it looks too clean. It's one of those things that drives me nuts. More bad acting, the little tinkerer kid, who I can never remember the name of, as well as Jet and all the bandits. Pretty bad acting. And again, unsure if it's for kids or adults, showing more horrors of war. I don't remember exactly what I meant when I was watching and writing that note down, but yeah, there's definitely a lot of stuff where it's like you're trying to reach the 30-year-olds that never watched Avatar, not the 10-year-olds that were born after Avatar was off air. And that's bad. The Azula archery range scene, which I think had been circulating on Twitter before the show had come out as one of the teasers. God, the acting is bad in that. And all of Azula's friends as well, May and Ty Lee, and I can't remember the other one. I don't think they're even mentioned by name in the series, by the way. That's just going off my memory. But there's one line, there's always a way to get in the game if you know which pieces to play. What the fuck is that line? What the fuck is that line? It's so bad. The metaphor doesn't make sense. It's just, yeah. And stuff like that made me miss Iroh's little idioms and wisdoms so much more. Because they were well written and they actually made sense. Katara, yeah, the Katara flashback where she keeps flashing back to her mother's death. I get the point that we're trying to do, but they keep flashing back to it. Like, it's constant. Like, there's at least one or two every episode. And it's literally the exact same shot every time. So I get that they were trying to set up the Spirit Forest scene with Katara that happens next episode, I think it is. But it feels like they're spoon feeding the viewer, being like, hey, remember, Katara's mom died. Hey, Katara's mom died. Don't forget, Katara's mom died. Like, it's treating the viewer like a fucking idiot. My face hurts now. And a fair note that I have issues with is it feels like there's no tension throughout the show. Now, I'm biased because I've watched the original and I watched the Shyamalan movie, so I'm already familiar with the story. And so obviously I'm biased to feel less tension because I know what the outcomes are. But even a couple of my friends that are going into this blind, they haven't watched any Avatar, have said that it doesn't feel like there's any tension. And that's something I feel like that Netflix does a lot. It's like things are so low stakes that it just feels like nothing's really going on, which makes it easy to consume. But at the same time, it also makes it boring. Next episode, the Two Lovers Secret Tunnel Song. I wanted to like it. I saw it coming and I was like, cool, I'm here for it. But it feels so out of place given the tone of the rest of the show that it was actually kind of jarring, which is a shame because I think it's still a good moment for the show, but it just doesn't quite hit. And the general pace of the show, despite being 30 minutes shorter than the original series or the original first season's runtime, feels slow. I think they cut out too much, honestly. There's all those little bits of character moments that just aren't fleshed out here that I think means that there's important shit missing. Character is one of the big things that they're missing here. Except for Zuko and Iroh, like I keep saying, they've been really good. But for Aang and Katara and Sokka, the moments where they have downtime to just chill and hang out and be kids is missing. And that takes away a lot of their characterization. I don't like that, like, there's earthbenders using the Force. This is kind of like the same issue as the Shyamalan version, where it's like earthbenders like pointing at a rock and then making the rock float and then moving the rock. Versus in the original series, earthbending is very much about being grounded. It's very strong movements and generally a bit more sudden. There's not, again, someone might have to correct me because it's been a while since I watched the original series, but I don't remember anyone just floating a rock above their head and doing, it looks like the Force. Versus, I think all the other bending in the show looks good. Particularly, actually, I was surprised how much I liked how the water bending looked. Firebending, even the original one had done firebending quite well. Airbending, fine. Aang's little floaty sphere thing, I don't like. That was in the Kyoshi episode. And just the way that it moves doesn't really make sense. Like, it's not moving in natural arcs. It's kind of just moving randomly. And especially if you're on a ball, it moves in arcs. It doesn't move randomly, unless obviously like it's something like bouncy, but we're talking about a sphere with no actual mass. Yeah. Oh, they keep pulling musical motifs from the original score, which I get what they're going for. Again, that like clashes with are they trying to target a new audience that's never watched the series, or trying to target the nostalgia of the original audience? And who fucking knows? But because the rest of the score is so bland, it's very noticeable when they pick out those motifs from the original series score, and they feel very out of place because they are far too distinctive compared to the rest of the scores. The actor playing Boomy does a really good job, even if the script butchers Boomy quite a lot. His kind of like hate towards Aang for being gone for years and years is really bad. That completely misses his point entirely. And they kind of start off with a he likes puzzles thing, and then he just turns malicious, and that's where it goes from, okay, this is like pretty good, to, yeah, no, you fucked it up again. And then episode 5 through 8 are all on one page because I was getting kind of fucking done with it. Apparently, the writing is extra bad in episode 5. I don't remember. I haven't gone back to watch it again, and I'm not going to. A lot of the conversations don't flow like an actual conversation, which again goes back to what I was saying about draft script vibes. Ira doesn't bring enough levity. Yep. The Spirit of Knowledge, the big spirit bird, looks really good. Appa and Momo also look really good. And that's probably why they're not in the show that much, because they're probably quite expensive to make. And then, yeah, we've built up to the whole Katara having flashbacks with her mum dying, and then the spirits forcing Katara to watch her mum die again is pretty fucked. I do think that scene did have the emotional impact they were going for, which I think is the only scene with Katara that's had an emotional impact, because her actress is just bad. Like, Sokka, Ian Owsley, is alright. I don't think he's good in this, but he's alright in 13 Reasons Why, and what's the other thing that I've seen him in? I can't remember, but overall, I think he's an alright actor. Like, not great, but alright. No, Katara just sucks throughout all of this. I haven't seen her in anything else, so maybe it's that, but... Episode 6, the Agni Kai scene, was set up really well until Zuko starts fighting back. Missing the whole point. That's the big thing, is like Netflix seems to be missing the whole point. The whole point with Agni Kai and why Ozai gets so angry at Zuko is because Zuko refuses to fight back. And having Zuko fight back takes away from the fact that they're trying to build out that inherently Zuko is very empathetic. The cold, heartless Zuko that we see at the start of the series is not his natural state of being. That's how he's nurtured into being. And that's also how in the original series we get that arc bringing Zuko back to his nature of being a very compassionate and loving person. I think they're kind of getting there. Like I said, the Zuko Iroh dynamics are really good, and I think that will build it out better than all the Ozai stuff. But yeah, Zuko fighting back during the Agni Kai undercuts that a little bit. And yeah, again, just like so many notes about moments like this would be amplified by having more levity in the rest of the show. By having those lighthearted moments, the serious moments like the Agni Kai feel more serious. Anyway, episode 7, my only note for this one, we finally got sexism, woo! But yeah, it's very undercooked, just like the rest of the series. It's one of those things that in the original series, there's those bits of traditional masculinity, sexism scattered throughout the entire world, right? And so when we get to the Northern Water Tribe, it makes a bit more sense. There's context to why there is that sexist idea that female waterbenders can only be healers and male waterbenders can only be fighters. And so, yeah, this is the first time that we get Katara actually pissed off. And I would have loved to have seen more of that throughout the entire series. That's a really important trait of Katara's that we just don't get enough of. Yeah, and then episode 8, right at the end, they give Sokka the line about, like, food. Where it's like, okay, now that that's over, where can we get some food? But it's not really established in this version that Sokka is passionate about food. It's not really addressed anywhere. And so this line just feels like it comes out of nowhere. Versus, yeah, Sokka and eating is like a really continuous running gag throughout the original series. And it's just not set up that way here. That's the end of my notes. I probably have more to say, but honestly, I don't think there's more worth saying. Overall, I think the series is like a 6.5 out of 10. It's not bad. If you haven't watched the original Last Airbender, you will probably enjoy it fine. You won't feel like it's a waste of your time. If you have watched the original series, then yeah, you're definitely going to feel like it's a waste of time. And I want to be optimistic about a season 2 because I see enough good things in this that season 2 could actually be good. And then a season 3 could be great. But do I trust Netflix to do that? No, not in the slightest. Anyway, I guess we will see what happens. Let me know what you think I should have scored it, or what your score is for it, because I'm hearing very varied opinions. Some of my friends are loving it. Those friends, I trust their opinion less now, sorry. Love you, chaotic and tox, but disappointed. And I would say a majority of the people that have watched it have not been terribly impressed. But none of them have been like super disappointed. No one's been like, this is dog water. Like, I watched the original Shyamalan one when that came out in theaters, and that was bad. And people saying that the Netflix one is worse or even the same level of bad as the Shyamalan one are insane. It's not. It's massively better than that. It's still not good. I would still say it is at its highest, like 70% of what the original series was. But it is way better than the Shyamalan one. The only thing I would say the Shyamalan one has a better, that does better than the Netflix one. The Shyamalan one has way better pacing. That's rough. That is an insult. Anyway, I'm done here. Bye.